Let's talk about how to hire a designer. How to get started. The first thing you want to do is you want to define your objectives and your budget. So what are you trying to actually do with your logo? Why are you reaching out to the designer? Why do you think you need to change your logo? That's definitely something I would ask any client first. What's the reason? Why do you feel like it needs to change? And usually when this is not somebody I've worked with before in a brand strategy, that's where that thought goes, because there needs to be a strategy behind it. And if you have the strategy, then you will have the reasons why you would want to change something. You want to ask your peers for recommendations. You can just go on Google and look for a designer online. It's possible. But why not use somebody that has already done similar work for people in your position, basically? So you can research online platforms like Fiverr or Upwork or Freelancer. There are platforms where you can hold a design contest like 99 Designs, where you upload your requirements basically, and then you have people bid on your project by sending in their designs, and you can choose the best ones, and then they can update their designs a little bit. So it's possible. That's the cheap version. You can definitely get a logo that way. You can also check portfolio websites like Behance and Dribbble. Lots of excellent designers on there. And if you find somebody that you like, you just reach out to them. Find your designers there. Next thing you want to do is you want to review their portfolios. You want to see that they've actually created logos before. This is not their first project. I mean, if you're just starting out, if you're a student and this is your first logo as well, you can probably work with a junior designer as well and get really good results for a really low price. But if you have an established practice and you're actually trying to scale or grow your business, I highly recommend finding an expert, finding somebody who's done this before. You want to interview the designers and make sure that you get along with them, that they ask the right questions. It'll give you a chance to ask questions as well. I'm going to talk about what you should be asking, what you need to know, what they need to know from you. You want to review a contract. A contract spells out everything you need to be clear about. So everybody knows what's expected in terms of the timelines, in terms of deliverables, and all the other things. I will talk about this in a minute too. Ask for references. Even if you've looked at their portfolio, if you can find somebody else in your space that have used them before, ask for references. Ask the references for their experience. How was it? Like what was working, what wasn't working, just so you have a better idea. And then trust your instincts. If something feels off, either ask more questions or keep looking. And the same way the other way around. If something feels really good and you just feel like it's aligned, then they did a really good job branding themselves, because you just feel like you're connecting with the person, you're connecting with that brand, and that might just be what you need, because somebody that can understand what you're saying, a really good listener, automatically makes it a better designer, because they're actually listening to what you're saying. So if there's a communication problem, it doesn't necessarily mean they're bad people. It just means they speak a different language. And sometimes that's problematic when it comes to design. Like you say something and they understand something differently. Trust your gut on this. What to consider when you try to decide between different designers. You want to look at their portfolio, like I said. So diversity. Like I think a good designer doesn't just have one style. They can create different logos for different brands, because in the end, it's not about me as a designer and me expressing myself through the design. It's about expressing somebody else's brand, right? So you want to make sure that they can actually take your brand strategy, if you have one, and create a logo that matches that brand strategy. Check out their style. Even if somebody has a lot of diversity, you might still not like their style. And check the quality of the design. If it looks like clip art, if you don't like the colors they use in all of their logos, there's a really good chance you're not going to like the colors they're going to use in your logos as well. It's not your zone of genius to come up with a color palette, right? That's why you're hiring a designer. So if you have to go back and forth and tell them what to do all the time, then you haven't hired a designer. You just hired like a typesetter or somebody. You want to make sure it feels high quality, even if it's not your brand. Into that kind of falls the experience. This comes with experience. So you want to make sure you hire a designer who's done this before, unless you're just starting out and you're trying to get a lower price and you're willing to make adjustments as time goes on. Just know that you will probably have to rebrand at some point, but that's okay. We outgrow our brands. We have to change our logos. Everybody does that, even the big brands, right? Pepsi has rebranded. I think they just rebranded again, either this year or last year. There's nothing wrong with that. Just be aware of it, okay? You get what you pay for to a certain degree. Sometimes you don't, but most of the time this is true. So look for somebody who is experienced. Look for social proof. Do they have testimonials? Do they have references? Do they have referrals? You also want to consider budget and price. How is the project priced? Is it priced per hour? Are you paying per hour? Is it a project-based price? Is it a package of some sort and there's other stuff included like social media designs or a website? All something you want to consider. And that also includes the deliverables. So what are you actually getting in the end? Different file formats. You want to be very clear on what you're getting there, what you need. Variations of your logo. You want to get a style guide. You want to get fonts, etc. What is actually included at the end? What do you get from them? And then you want to consider the time frame. How long do they take to create your logo? Do you have a deadline because there's an event coming up or because it's your big opening? Are they available right now? Do they have time on their calendar to actually take on your project? So you want to be really clear about those things. So let's talk about what they need to know about your project before they get started. This is what they will likely ask you about before they start, or what they should ask you about. If they don't ask most of these, that's a red flag for me. If they just get started creating something without having asked any of those questions, you should step back and say, hold on, what are you actually doing right now? So the first thing is a business overview. This is pretty obvious. You probably get that done in the first time you talk to them. So an overview over your business. What's the name? What's the industry? What are the products or services you offer? Next thing is something that isn't often asked, but I think it's just as important, and that's all your brand essence stuff. So your vision, your mission, your values, and your purpose. That's what I always call the heart and soul of your brand. That is important, and it should also be at least known to the designer so they can possibly incorporate that in the logo, in the feel of the logo in the brand. Might just influence the colors a bit. They should definitely ask about your target audience because that's who you're creating the logo for in the end. What are demographics, psychographics? Who are your ideal customers? What are their preferences? What do they like? Competitor analysis, just as important. They should be asking, or at least looking at, who are your direct competitors and your indirect competitors? How are they showing up? What do their logos communicate? What colors do they use? And how do you want to differentiate your brand? How are you different from them? Not only in your messaging, but your logo needs to be different too. If you're going to end up with a logo that looks like everybody else's logo, that's really bad, because branding is about differentiation. You want to be very clear about the objectives of your logo. So what are the goals you're trying to achieve with that new logo? Why did you change it in the first place? Right? We already talked about this. But also, what message or emotions should it convey? So that usually comes from your brand persona. If you have a brand strategy, you have created this already. What are you trying to express? Who is this brand persona? And that will go into the creation process as well. If you have any design preferences, if you have any styles that you like better, something more modern or something vintage or minimalist, if there's any colors that you like, maybe you have specific colors in your office already. This is something that I often ask about. What does your office look like? Are you planning on changing your office? Is that in the budget? Are there any design elements in your office that you want to include in your brand? You know, a special wood, maybe some floors or a rug you have, or specific patterns on a pillow on the wall. Whatever it is, there are probably some design elements in your office that can be pulled into the brand. And it just makes the overall brand more cohesive. People will recognize things like that. If you have the same color in your logo as the chairs in your office, people might not necessarily think about it, but it creates a connection in their brain and it makes it easier to remember your brand. So if there are any specific elements that you want to include, or some symbols you want to include, or something that you want to avoid, that's things that your designer should know about. If you have any examples or inspiration, like logos that you really like or a brand aesthetic that you're drawn to, just share that with your designer as well. Explain what you like or what you don't like about certain logos or brands. So it doesn't just have to be, oh, I really like this, I want something in the style of this. You can also say, don't do that, right? Negative examples work as well. The more information, the better, really. If you don't have any, that's fine too. But if you do, you definitely need to share it. Budget and timeline obviously are important. They will ask about this as well. They should anyways, at least about the timeline. Are there any deadlines coming up? If there's this expected timeline for the completion of the project, what are the payment plans for this? Is it all upfront, or is there 2 payments, 50-50, or how is this going to get paid? Legal requirements. If there are any considerations or trademark requirements for the logo, mention them in the brief as well, just in case. If you're planning on trademarking your logo, it shouldn't make a huge difference to the designer, but it's always good to know that. If you have a trademark lawyer, they might have some insights as well in terms of what colors to use and more specifics. It's just something to keep in mind and to ask about. And if you're planning on doing that, mention it to the designer and possibly get them in touch with your trademark lawyer as well, your copyright lawyer. Deliverables, obviously. Outline the specific deliverables you expect. This is important. At least ask about what's usually included in the package that I'm going to receive. You want all your digital files. You want the source files of your logo so you can make small adjustments if necessary. If you just have a JPEG, you can't do anything with that. It's just a pixel file. You can't even put it on a t-shirt properly, okay? So be very clear on what you're getting. And also if there are going to be any guidelines or style sheets or anything like that. And the last point that you should let them know is the best way to communicate with you. So how are they going to send files for you to review? Is it going to be via email? Do they have a online review system that they're using? How many revisions are included in the design? That's something really important that you should include in the project scope, so you know. Things like that. So that's basically the list of everything your designer needs to know before they can start with the project. And if they don't ask, especially the column on the left here, if they don't ask you those things, that's for me a red flag. They need to know this to create an effective logo specifically for your brand. That doesn't mean they can't create a pretty logo. It's just not going to be a strategic logo. All right? There's a difference.